The Gates of Camino.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
Come on, take it all out.
No! Look out, Chick! Cover up! What's the matter? Cover up! Wait a minute.
The nation's top comics, Abbott and Costello. Petrified, but hilariously. Plus the dangerous and terrifying Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney. Plus that fiend out of a nightmare, the vampire Batman, Count Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi. Plus the most dreaded creature of them all, the Frankenstein monster, played by Glenn Strange. Plus a couple of luscious but designing females in the spookiest laugh fest on record.
It's been a little while, but yeah, this is the Halloween edition of Chimino. So yeah, I don't know. I was thinking what to do, and I don't know. We always have good conversations about Abbott and Costello, so I thought, Meet Frankenstein would be the one to do.
Sure. I think this is probably a lot of monster kids, or at least horror fans kind of our age. This is kind of an introductory film into horror, I think, because it's got monsters, but it's also a comedy. And I think it was a good film for kids that kind of introduce kids into the Universal Monster series and also horror in general.
Right. Now, was it the first horror comedy, do you think?
It depends on what you would consider horror comedy. There had been like scary. There'd been like comedies where people were like in haunted houses and stuff like that, and even Abbott and Costello even did one. It was the second film they made. It was called Hold That Ghost. It was them in a haunted house. So if you consider that horror comedy, then no. But you might even go so far back as to say, oh God, what was it? The Cat and the Canary, the 1927 version could be a horror comedy because it was an old dark house mystery comedy. But yeah, it's like Abbott and Costello. This Hold That Ghost was the second film they shot. But because their first film, Buck Privates, had done so well at the theater, Universal figured, well, we want their next film to be another military themed movie. So they held on to Hold That Ghost. They put it on the back burner, even though it had already been shot, and they rushed them into production with a film called In the Navy, which was set in the Navy, obviously. And then they released Hold That Ghost. And Hold That Ghost did so well. I mean, the audiences loved Lou Costello when he was scared. They loved all the scared bits that he would do. So from that film on, Universal always tried to work at least one scene where Lou got spooked about something into every movie that they did.
Oh, man.
And then when it came to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, they just, went full out.
Yeah, yeah.
The film was originally going to be called The Brain of Frankenstein. But when the executives had a meeting and they tested some titles, they found out that people thought Brain of Frankenstein was just another serious Frankenstein movie. So they tested the title Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and that tested way better because it showed that there's going to be comedy and scares and stuff like that. So that's why they went with it.
I love the opening with the cartoon.
Yeah, and for years it's uncredited as who did it, but I mean it's generally considered that Walter Lantz, who was the cartoonist for Universal, who did the Woody Woodpecker, Andy Panda, Chili Willy cartoons. It's generally felt now that he was the one who did that animation.
For the 40s, though, it was pretty good, the animation and the whole movie. Actually, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the animation for that opening scene was really good. And I think if you look at it real close, you can kind of see Walter Lance's touches in there.
Mm-hmm.
But when the script for this movie came out, Lou Costello did not want to do it. He did not.
Why?
He did not want to do it. He thought it was stupid.
Oh God. He should
thought
look
the
at himself then.
he infamously told one of the execs, he's like, "You don't think I'm really going to do this crap, do you?" He goes, my 6-year-old daughter could write a better script than this. Now, the script they shot was the third script that had been written, and if he was talking about the second script, I don't know who wrote it, but the second script was awful.
Oh, okay.
It was just dumb. They had. Now, going a little further back, Abbott and Costello had wanted to do a thing where they met Frankenstein and Dracula as a Broadway show, but it didn't. It fell through. It didn't work out. So when they did this movie, I don't know if that was a little resentment behind it or what, but the second script was so stupid, Vito. It was about Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, and the Wolfman are all exhibits in this wax museum. Mm-hmm. Abbott and Costello go and look at it, and then just one thing leads to it. And it turns out that salt and vinegar can revive the Frankenstein monster. Baked beans can revive the Wolfman. And if you pulled the steak out of Dracula's heart, he'd come back to life. Well, Costello's looking at the exhibits and he's eating, and all those items get thrown into the monster's faces, and then the table's is wobbly or something. So Costello pulls the steak out of Dracula's heart to steady the table. Then they all come back to life. And then there's this mad scientist who resolves everything at the end by he uses an atomizer ray to shrink the monsters down to 4 inches tall. And then Abbott and Costello take the monsters and they show them on Broadway in their tiny forms. But the scientist tells him, whatever you do, don't let them have access to olives because that will undo the ray. And of course, Costello's eating some kind of deli sandwich and the olives fall off his plate. The monsters get a hold of him. Boom, regular size. And the end as they chase Costello and Abbott.
Oh, God. I mean, I guess that's better than Brooklyn Gorilla, but that's... God damn, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I never heard that before.
Oh, yeah, it's horrible. And it was Universal's second cheapest movie that year. It was the second cheapest production they had that year, which I think was 1948. It was their second biggest moneymaker that year, too. And Costello's mother saw it, and she told him, she goes, "I think that's the best movie you've made so far." And while he was proud of that, he was also kind of irritated by it because originally he didn't want to do it.
Oh, man. I mean, this movie was like a staple of like my youth growing up. Like me and my brothers, anytime it would come on, it was like such a big event. It was like one of our favorite movies. And I don't know, like we'll talk a little bit here about which you tell so well, the straight man, funny man thing. And as a kid, it's all like Lou's funny and he's like, Chad, doing all that stupid shit he does. But like the older I get, the more annoying he gets. And the more I find myself liking Bud Abbott, certainly his character in this movie, Chick better.
Right. Well, the thing about Bud Abbott, I kind of agree with you. Of the two, I kind of find myself leaning more toward Bud Abbott because I think he was a really good comic actor. And although I don't think he did any movies without Lou, if you ever watch their film, The Time of Their Lives, also directed by the same director, Charles Barton, they're not in it together. They're not a comedy team in it. I mean, Bud Abbott plays a character and Lou Costello plays another character, but they're not friends. They're not together. And if you watch that movie and you see all these scenes with Bud Abbott on his own, he's really good as a comic actor. His timing's perfect. And that's kind of why these guys met in vaudeville, and that's how they got their start. And the pay split was always just standard for those times. The pay split was 60-40, with Abbott getting 60% and Costello getting 40%. And that seems kind of strange because everybody remembers Lou probably better than Bud. But the old adage was, comics are a dime a dozen, but a straight man is worth his weight in gold. And you have to say that Bud Abbott was probably the best straight man of any comedy team that existed because his timing and the way he could always, if Costello started getting out of hand, the way he could always rein him back into the skit was just exemplary.
Yeah, I totally agree, and the way he did it in this one too was amazing. Especially the opening, not the opening, but when they finally get to the museum and they're opening up all the caskets and everything. I thought that's those two at their best, except for the
Yeah,
third base routine, of course.
that was really good, and again, that really played into Costello's scared bit, the things he would do. And Abbott was always like the gruff, no nonsense type, although he wasn't really that much smarter than Costello.
I have to tell you though, Mark, real fast, what stood out this past watch for me, which I never really thought about before, was in this last viewing that I've had, was how good Lugosi and Lon Chaney Jr. are in this. It's like their best acting, both of them, in any movie they've ever done. They're both like, they steal the movie to me.
Well, Bela Lugosi almost didn't play Dracula in this film. They, way back in 1931, when Universal was making the original Dracula, they wanted to use this. Even then, they weren't sure they wanted Lugosi. They wanted to use this other actor called Ian Keith. But Lugosi won the part, I think, probably because he was such a hit on Broadway doing Dracula. So when it came time to do this movie, John Carradine was on Broadway doing a show. He wasn't available, and I think they looked into someone else. But then they go, well, let's do Ian Keith. And when Lugosi heard about this, he contacted his agent and said, I'm Dracula. I should be playing this part. So his manager contacted the people at Universal and said, listen, said Bela Lugosi is Dracula. He made millions of dollars for you guys. You need to have him play this part because he's done so much for your studio. So basically, Lugosi's manager shamed him into it. And this is only the second of two times that Lugosi would ever play Dracula. So yeah, it worked out really well for him. Now, the thing about Lugosi, Abbott and Costello loved clowning around on the sets when they were shooting their films. They loved to, if they weren't playing poker while the next shot were being set up, then they just loved clowning around. And they had this guy, this friend of Costello's named Bobby Barber. And Bobby Barber, his job was to help keep the energy up between takes. So he would run around and just do stupid stuff, or he would give pies to Abbott and Costello, let them throw pies in his face.
Oh, God.
Stuff like that. But sometimes he would ruin takes on purpose just to keep people laughing. And one of the most famous ones, and I think you can see some of these outtakes on YouTube, there's one where Lugosi's coming down the stairs. I think it's a scene where he, as Dr. Lejos, he's coming down the stairs and he's meeting everybody for the first time. But there's a take where Bobby Barber's behind him holding his coat over his face like Lugosi does with his cape in the movie. And he's right behind Lugosi coming down the stairs, and Lugosi doesn't see him until he gets down in position. And then everybody starts laughing, and Lugosi turns around and sees Bobby Barber standing behind him.
Oh.
And he got mad. And he was like, we should not be playing while we are working.
I kind of agree with Lugosi on that one. That'd be so annoying after a while with some guy running around constantly. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, fuck, dude.
Yeah. But they said he kind of enjoyed the jokes and stuff as long as he wasn't the butt of it. And Lon Chaney Jr. also supposedly enjoyed all the craziness that was going on set with everybody too. So,
oh, that's cool. Yeah, they were really good in it. And this was Glenn Strange as Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Now, how many times did he play Frankenstein?
Glenn Strange on film played the monster 3 times. House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And supposedly they went and asked Boris Karloff first if he wanted to come back and play the monster, and he said no, because he said, he goes, you guys are going to make fool out of him, and I don't want to do that. And so he refused. So he said no. Glenn Strange took up the part and did a really good job. Now, there's one boo-boo in the movie that is kind of easy to see. In the laboratory scene toward the end, when all hell's breaking loose, Lon Chaney is turned into the Wolfman. He's chasing Dracula down the hallway, and then the doctor, Sandra Mornay, is in there. Costello kicks a piece of electrical equipment, and that gives the monster a jolt. Now, while all this is going on, there's a shot in there where Glenn Strange is on the table, and he turns his head over toward Costello to see what's going on. And if you look really closely, there's a cable attached to one of his electrodes. And as he turns his head, the electrode peels off. It was just like glued to his throat. But if you look, you can see that electrode peel itself off.
Oh, that's great. I didn't notice that.
And then the monster gains strength. He busts out the table. He grabs the doctor and he throws her through that skylight window.
That was crazy oh man, that was nuts. That was a good part.
Now, Lenore Albert, if that's how you pronounce her name, she wanted to do that stunt. She said, "Oh, let me do it. Let me do it." And they said, "No, we can't let you do it." So they had a stunt woman for her. And it was a good thing she didn't, because when they threw the stunt woman through the glass, she was on a wire. When they threw her through the glass, she got some of the candy glass in her eye. And then when she hit the ground, she really hurt her hip. So they had to take her to the hospital. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, on one of the takes, or on the first take or whatever, when Glenn Strange throws her through the glass, she was on a wire. So she smashes through the glass, but then she swings back into the set.
Oh.
And she hits Glenn Strange, causing him to trip over a cable, and he fractured his ankle.
Oh man.
So they said you can't be on your feet for like 2 days. And the production was already behind schedule at this point. So Lon Chaney Jr., who had already played the Frankenstein monster once in The Ghost of Frankenstein, he stepped in and goes, "Hey, I'll do it. I'll play the monster until he gets better." And they were like, "Okay." So if you watch the movie, after Glenn Strange throws Dr. Mornay through the window,
yes,
and then in the foreground, the next shot in the foreground, Chick is helping Wilbur get off the table, but you can see the monster just, swinging his arms and smashing things in the background. That's Chaney.
I noticed it this time. I was like, I think it's Chaney. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to notice because he moves differently. Strange is always kind of very stiff as the monster, but this monster, when Chaney was playing him, was a little more agile and a little more angrier. Yeah. So he took
Chaney
over.
Has that face. Lon Chaney Jr. has that face too. It's really hard to cover it up, no matter what makeup you put on. You can tell it's him. It's like...
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's crazy, but they did a great job on it, and it's definitely my favorite Abbott and Costello movie. How far into their thing did this movie? This was pretty late in their careers, correct?
I think it was probably around in the middle of their careers.
Okay,
their movies were definitely on a downward slope. I think the one they did right before this was The Wistful Widow of Wagon Gap, and that one just was doing okay, I think, but the numbers at the box office were definitely going down with each film to do this. And then boom, this movie hit, and bang, they're back up to number one again at the box office, because this movie, like I said, just did so incredibly well.
Was this before or after Who's on First? The routine's what made them famous, huh?
Yeah, they became famous on vaudeville with those routines. So that's why, and Costello trusted that material so much that they said, I saw an interview with the director, Charles Barton, and he said Costello, all he wanted to do was stand in front of the camera and redo those routines, because he said he trusted them so much, and he was wary of anything that was new. So all those movies beforehand, you'll see a lot of their bits in them, a lot of their vaudeville bits.
Okay.
And when it came to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, the director said, "I really don't want to do those bits in this movie. I want it to be a whole fresh new movie." And Costello was like, "No." He goes, I trust these routines too much. We have to put them in the movie. So they're shooting that scene. It's after Wilbur and Chick have gotten out of jail they've been arrested for stealing the museum exhibits, and they're released the next evening. And so they said, we need to get out of town. So they do this routine called packing, unpacking. So Abbott is standing in the foreground, and he's like, "Yeah, we need to get out of town. It's too, we're going to get in trouble if we stay here." So Costello is taking all their clothes out of the dresser and putting them in a suitcase. And then Abbott changes his mind. "But why should we run? If we run, they're just going to think we're guilty. We need to stay here and defend ourselves." So Costello grabs the clothes out of the suitcase and puts them back in the drawer. And then of course Abbott flips again. "But it's too dangerous. I think we should go." And this goes on for a while. That's the routine. So they were doing that routine. They were filming it, and it just kept going on and on and on. And Barton didn't stop it. So finally, at one point, Costello just throws the clothes into the suitcase, and he looks at Barton, and while the camera's rolling, he goes, "Aren't you going to call cut?" And then Barton just kind of looked at him and said, "I'm waiting for something funny to happen."
Oh, man.
Well, of course, Costello, who everybody loved Costello, but everybody also admitted that he was called the Little Terror, and he was this hot-headed Italian. Costello, he blew his cool. He stormed off the set and went home. But then the next morning he showed up on time and he goes, okay, let's try it your way. And that's the scene they did that made it into the movie where they're talking, where he does the imitation of Dracula and the Frankenstein monster to Bud. Now, they did keep a version of one routine in the film, and that's the one that was always called the moving candle. And the bit was that Costello was someplace in a haunted house or something, and Abbott goes to find a way out, and Costello's supposed to be looking at a map or something. They did this in Hold That Ghost. And the candle starts moving. And every time the candle moves, Lou yells for Bud, and Bud comes running in. And of course, the candles stop moving at that point. So in this movie, in Meet Frankenstein, Lou puts the candle on top of Dracula's coffin. And he's sitting there he starts reading the card about who Dracula is, and he's getting scared from that. But then Dracula's coffin lid opens a little bit, and that makes the candle slide, and then the coffin lid comes back down. And of course, Costello doesn't realize it's the coffin lid doing it. He thinks the candle's moving by itself, so he keeps calling Bud in to check it. So that's the only routine that really made it into Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Okay, that's a great section of the movie. That's like my favorite part. Everything that happens in there when they first introduce Dracula and Frankenstein.
Yeah, the Wax Museum bit is really fun. I mean, it's really atmospherically lit, and the set is great, and it's just it's a really good scene to happen that early in the film.
Yeah, definitely. And I also noticed there is a second woman that shows up trying to find, the Wax Museum or whatever they're looking for. And she is, I forget her name, but she's from Cat People, right?
Jane Randolph.
Randolph. Okay.
She was the woman who liked the guy. I don't know how to put it or better now. She was the human lead.
Yeah.
Blonde hair, very pretty. She was in Cat People as well, and they cast her in this movie as the second female lead, as the heroine, I guess.
And it was so fucking annoying with these women on top of like Lou Costello, and they're kissing him and everything. And I mean, I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, it's funny, it's funny watching Abbott freaking out and everything. But it's like, we talked about this before about like, there's something about you if you're when you're so far somewhere, they were very conservative, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, Costello especially.
Yeah,
Costello was a McCarthyist, and
it kind of comes out on his comedy. The older you get, you see it. You're like, this guy isn't that fucking funny. I mean, it's almost like he looks funny and he has the mannerisms to make him funny in the moment. But like you said, it was like Bud Abbott. You really see, he definitely has more comedy chops.
Well, Costello's comedy was mostly in his physicality. I mean, the way he moved and reacted when he was scared or surprised or startled. I think he was funny, but but if you ever watched the movie The 50-Foot Bride of Candy Rock, which is I think the only film he did by himself.
Okay.
He's not good. I mean, he needed Abbott to be there and help him. But yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I told you before, a friend of mine, he used to live in Lou Costello's old house, and he'd have parties there, but it was the house with the pool where his son died. I was going to
ask you if it was the house with the pool.
Yeah, it's that pool. And every October, he used to have Halloween parties and call it the ghost of Lou Costello's sons.
Oh my God.
That was the name of the party or something like that. It was
Ghost
really
of
morbid,
Butch Costello.
Yeah. But what happened? It was his son, right? He had a pool, and he had a 2-year-old son, I believe.
It was his son was less than a year old.
Oh shit. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
I think he was only a month away from his first birthday, and he was in his crib. Abbott and Costello they were going to do a radio show because at the time they had a very popular radio show, and then they had one. And then what happened was Lou had come down with, I think, rheumatic fever. And so he got real sick and he had to stop working for like a year. But he finally got over it. It took him a year to recover. And they were going to do this show. This was their big comeback show. So they were going to do this show with Bud. And at home, Lou had told his wife, he goes, turn the radio on because I want Butch to hear his dad on the radio. The baby had been left in a crib. And when they went to look for him, he was gone. and they looked all around the place. They couldn't find him. They looked in the pool, but he wasn't there. So they came back, looked in the house some more, and then they went back and checked the pool again. And this time they found him. The baby had somehow gotten out of his crib, crawled into the pool, and drowned.
Fuck.
Now, it's showtime, right? Abbott and Costello are getting ready to go on the air, and Lou is told the news that his son is dead right before they go on the air. But he says, I'm going to go on. I'm going to go ahead and go on. So they do the show. He gives a great performance. Then he rushes to go home, and then Bud Abbott comes out on stage and informs the audience about what happened.
God damn, no way.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know if I would have done that. I would have let.
Well, hey, the show must go on. I gotta give him some props for that. That's shit. You gotta, I mean,
show must go on. I guess.
Show must go on. Those fucking vaudeville guys are hardcore, man.
Oh yeah. Oh man, they were. They totally were. But now,
that's wild.
As most people know, Bud Abbott had epilepsy. So that started him drinking because he discovered that if he drank alcohol, it would help quell the epileptic attacks, the seizures he would have. And sometimes if they got really bad, Costello would punch him in the stomach as hard as he could because somehow that would also stop it. So if Abbott was having a really bad epileptic seizure, Costello would just punch him in the gut. And that would stop it. But yeah, Charles Barton, the director, said, if you ever saw Bud have one of those seizures, he goes, it was the worst thing to watch in the world. He goes, it was absolutely awful.
Man.
But then because Bud drank so much, because he was afraid, if the longer the day went, the more he was afraid of having a seizure. So he started drinking heavily, and that's how he became an alcoholic. But during this day when they were filming, Bud always told the director, he goes, get everything you need with me before 4:00. He goes, because after 4:00, I'm done. So
I'm toast.
Yeah. So that's how they had to shoot with Bud Abbott. Lou Costello was younger than Bud Abbott, and Lou Costello actually died first. He died.
Yes, surprise.
God, I don't remember how he died either, but they had a falling out by that time. And as an act, they had split up. And when Bud was shown the picture, the newspaper of Lou Costello that's proclaimed him dead, he was really sad because he said, man, I didn't know if he was sick, I could have helped cheer him up or something. There's a very famous picture of Bud Abbott sitting at a table looking at the newspaper that said Lou Costello dead.
Oh, damn. Okay.
So.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
It's weird with those teams. You work together with someone for so long. You just know each other so well. You make all this money, and it's just bound to blow up eventually.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's like at one point, Costello, I don't know if the 60-40 split went on into their films or not, but I know at some point Costello wanted it flipped. He wanted to get the 60% and Abbott 40%, and he wanted to change the name of the team to Costello and Abbott. And
oh shit, okay.
But the studio wouldn't let him do it. And then they had this big split. Costello had a maid in his house, and he fired her. I don't know why, but he fired her. Well, after she got fired by Costello, she went to Bud Abbott, and he hired her to work in his house. And when Costello found that out, he got so angry that caused them a big fight to split up. And that's why they split up.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, because of the stupid little
unbelievable.
But I mean, their hearts were always in the right place. I mean, like I said, they were very patriotic. Their films were going on during World War II.
Yeah, they used to go overseas, right?
They would do what was that?
Because they weren't called USO tours yet.
No, but it was basically the same thing. They would go overseas and perform for the troops. They did a cross-country tour where they tried to raise money for war bonds, and they raised like $80 million in war bonds for the U.S. government. And of course, that all came back not to bite them on the ass, but to betray them, really, because they had a tax guy who was handling their money, and he didn't pay any of their income taxes. He just kind of pocketed it. And suddenly, after all these years, the U.S. government, the IRS, comes knocking, and they say, hey, you guys owe us like, $1 million in back taxes each. And they didn't know what to do, And they're like, well, wait a minute, we did all this stuff for the government. We raised $80 million in war bonds for the government. And they're like, we don't care. We're going to make an example of you guys. We have to show the public that even though you did this big thing for us, you're not above paying taxes. So they really kind of, stuck it to them on that.
Yeah,
they had to go, and they had to get back. And I think that may have been why they started performing together again, because they had to pay off that $1 million income
Oh,
tax.
shit.
All right. Stop. All right, here we go. All right, little camera. All right. That's for me, dear. Cut it. Cut it.
Cut it.
Quiet. Coming up the stairs. Here we go. All right.
How careless. One should be careful. A person could get killed that way.
Quiet. All right. Camera. Poor girl. She don't look so good. Looks like she's getting one of her headaches back.
Do you know who that man is?
That's stuck. Yeah, time. Cut. That's for me.
Cut.